Welcome back to the audio version of our on-strip at-home training series with the All-American Fencing Academy. Last time we talked to Val Austin, and she talked about catastrophic thinking and how to get out of it. This time we will be talking to Coach Ron Miller. The topics that we discuss aren't just for the athletes. They'll be good for our parents too. So while you're cleaning, while you're at home, while the children are doing homework, or while you're taking a walk in the neighborhood, put it on your cell phone, put on some headphones, and we hope you enjoy and learn something from the interview. The All-American Fencing Academy, we've been doing, of course, our online videos. For all our kids and all of our students.
Right.
And, in between, I've also been doing some an audio series, mostly dealing with resilience type stuff. Before we begin, just to explain what you're seeing in the background. I'm actually in my closet. It's a trick I heard on I think This American Life with Ira Glass, and he said, if you need a makeshift recording room, the closet with all your clothes is a great place to be because it kind of absorbs the sound. So what you see directly behind me is my bathroom. But when the students listen to this, they won't be able to see anything. Okay. It'll just be audio when I release it. But thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Before we begin, I want to go ahead and get a chance to introduce you, so all my students know who we're talking to. Of course, you are the retired coach for UNC after 52 years, right?
Yep.
Good. And and in your time there, what else have you done as a fencing coach?
Well, I also coach the North Carolina Fencing Development Program, NCFDP.
And were you also coach for some a national team?
In the past, yes.
Okay, good.
UNC. Oh, sorry. We'll start again. USFCA, United States Fencing Coaches Association.
Okay, and you are also a doctor, right? Not a medical doctor, but
right. PhD in higher education, guidance, psychology, and exercise science.
Very good, very good. And I of course fenced for you from the around 96 to 99 time period, and I took your class
a couple of years ago,
1995. So we kind of started this discussion. You got a chance to listen to the last audio series I had with Val. Val is a ready resilient expert with the Army. Right. And that sparked some additional topics. And after that discussion, if you've got a little bit of time, just a short amount of time, I'd like to talk about just a little bit about collegiate fencing and at-home training. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right, great. So one of the things that we talked about with Val was catastrophic thinking. We had three types. It was spiraling, scattershot, and circling. And then, of course, we also had a method of trying to get out of that catastrophic thinking. You said it was very similar to some of the things that you talked about with your students. First thing I want to talk about, you sent me, was turning around negative thinking. And one of the first things that you talked about was negative thinking has numerous disadvantages. When do you find that athletes, or specifically fencers, start or have negative thinking?
Well, either they have a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure because they look at their opponent and they say, well, this person is an All-American or fences for a certain team, and they don't feel as prepared or as experienced as the other athlete. So one of the hard challenges is to get them to consider the fact that every opponent is worthy of self-respect.
Right.
And that their job is to fence the opponent, regardless of whether they over-respect them or under-respect them.
I see. And I definitely I've faced that too, when I'm fencing on the strip. Let's go through some of the disadvantages. The first thing you mentioned was it makes you physically and weak. Describe that. How does that manifest itself?
Well, it's both mentally and physically. One of the things that in some elements of sports psychology where they use something called galvanic skin response, the actual chemistry of the surface of your skin changes.
Oh.
You become sweaty, your hand, and then you also become weaker. So, example, a lot of times before or after a bout, when I shake hands with an athlete, I'm assessing their weakness or strength. So, for instance, if I shake hands with them before the bout and they give me a strong handshake, they're mentally and physically ready. But if they give me a limp fish and it's kind of cold and sweaty, that's not a good sign.
Right. Me sometimes just even before the bout, maybe my favorite weapon is not working, or I've lost my favorite weapon. That's already kind of put me at a sometimes me mentally, just it kind of gets me into negative thinking. It's like, I don't have my favorite weapon, or I don't have the jacket that I normally wear, and that's taking me out of my game. The second thing you list was it encourages practice of wrong behavior. Explain that a little bit.
Okay, when you're talking about wrong behavior, it means you're already doing negative self-talk. Maybe you are anxious or angry at your teammates, or you physically withdraw. Right. Or mentally withdraw from what you want to do. Right. So you're not as you normally would.
I see. And the third one, I think, to me, sounds a little related to number one. It leads to lack of confidence, which can decrease your drive.
Right. If you're emotionally involved in the bout, then you have a drive to succeed and a lot of energy going into your actions. If you don't have that, then you are flat.
Right. And I remember when, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just what I remember. Right. I would remember when we had tough bouts when I was on the team. You would always tell us or remind us, hey, keep our head up. No matter what was happening in the bout, if we were down, if we were losing, to keep our head up and keep going.
Yeah.
So the next one we said disturbs concentration for the task.
Right. If you, for instance, had a plan for the bout, you knew you wanted to be mostly offensive or assertive, and you had a few things in mind. If you lose that focus or that concentration, then it's hard to remember the things you wanted to do.
I can understand that. There was I can recall about and I think for our soldiers too, they have a similar thing where they just kind of get tunnel vision. I remember a bout where I was pretty sure I could win it. I was doing the right thing, and I had come off of just a 10-minute break because I had gotten cramps, and I was able to get through the target, but I was always hitting off target. And in my mind, I just kept saying, well, I'm doing the right thing. I'm just hitting off target. I just need to fix it, but it never fixed itself. And I kind of had that tunnel vision where instead of going someplace else and trying something different and trying to hit on target, I just kind of kept continuing with something that wasn't working. So I think that's kind of related to that. Your next one was the more you think negative, the more you act negative.
Yeah, again, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are thinking negative, then you will be when you get out there. It's not like something you can just turn a switch and all of a sudden you're the other way.
Okay. And the last one, it can result in anxiety and worry. How do you when you see fencers starting to get anxiety and worry on the strip or in a bout or maybe in practice, what are some of the physical manifestations you see from that?
Well, in collegiate bouts, you see that because the athlete either becomes placid, it maybe is the right word, or maybe too much so, but they're not as active as they were.
Right.
Their shoulders slump. They walk back to the strip or back to their own guard line with their head down. Or they're very fidgety. It can be exhibited either way. But most often, if that were the circumstance, I would call a timeout and either ask them a question to try to redirect what their thinking was. It's pretty even more extreme. I would try to tell them a stupid joke just to break the tension.
But for example, what kind of question might you ask them to redirect their thinking?
If, for instance, if they're making the same attack over and over and getting hit on the same repos, the question is, okay, are you observing that attack isn't working? What can you do to make that change?
I see.
Either change the attack or switch to defense.
I see. When I talked to Val, of course, when we were talking about our catastrophic thinking, we needed a way. One, we had to recognize that we were in catastrophic thinking.
Right.
But we also needed a way to get out of it. So here you talk about you have to employ a mental pacemaker. What's a mental pacemaker?
I have sort of revised that form since I sent it to you.
That's okay.
I don't really like the word pacemaker.
Sure.
This was, in a way, someone else's idea.
Sure.
So I like the idea of the progression that they used. The wording, in my thought, is actually it's a Q word.
Okay.
And they use that expression also in part of that discussion.
Right.
The main thing is that you have something you can identify with to immediately put yourself in a different place. So if you know this is happening, then you're going to make that observation of yourself and your own behavior. And let's say that word is fight, or that word might be relax, or whatever it means to that person, to get them to identify that they need to make a change.
I heard this once from a counselor or a therapist, and I think it's called image rehearsal therapy. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
And is that similar to that?
Sure, because if you look down that list of things that we were imagery, viewing something which is taking you completely away from what you're doing, that is calm or pleasant, or getting you away from the fearfulness or negativity. Right, it's a good way to turn things around.
Right, and it's one of the things you also mentioned as you're doing this is to take deep cleansing breaths. I didn't do it in an audio for the kids, but I did talk about an email. I talked to them about diaphragmatic breathing, right. Which is I think what you're leading to here. What and I'm trying to remember my degree, of course, was physical education, exercise, sports science. But what does shallow breathing do to you in this circumstance?
If you are breathing short and fast, you're either taking in too much oxygen or not enough. So in a lot of cases, you need a cleansing breath, which basically means to take in a deeper breath, to hold it for a little while, to relax, to allow yourself to calm back down. But if you're doing things that are choppy, whether that's breathing or moving or whatever it happens to be, that has a tendency to disrupt what you're trying to do.
Right. Good. A lot of this sounds, because I also see a lot of what Jennifer does for yoga and meditation. Right. A lot of this has some similarities with meditation or just having a mantra for yourself.
Right. Yes.
And you said, trying to get someone out of their thoughts for a second. I remember Matt McMurray when I would help him hook up to a bout, or when he'd have that minute break. I just remember he'd always, one of the first things he'd ask from me is, Gerhard, tell me a joke. I never totally quite understood that at the time, but I get it now. It got him out of his mind for just a second. Just like meditation or mantras, you have to practice this. You can't just do this when you need it, right?
Right. And that's basically what it's saying, is that you want to try to find a way to have several things at once that you can do in sequence that help you redirect. Right. So, it could be standing in a certain position. It could be holding your weapon a certain way. It could be a certain type of thought that you're thinking, using that cue word, whatever it happens to be, but to recognize where you are and to reset.
I assume, for hopefully some of our parents that might be listening, like basketball players, when they're at the free throw line, they're going through that same routine. They probably have gone through the same thoughts in their head. Okay, this is what this looks like. This is what the shot looks like going in. I'm going to do the same number of dribbles. I'm going to do a little spin on the ball before I make the shot. They just go through their own routine.
Right. And that word routine is very important, because it's not something that they have to do, but it's something that's comfortable for them. Right. That if they're doing it almost subconsciously, it helps.
You had a quote, I think someone posted on the alumni page, about practice makes perfect. Do you remember what that quote is?
Yeah, it's perfect practice makes perfect permanent.
And what percentage of the time?
Well, it's not so much all the time, but it is, it's certainly going to be better than if you just practice the error.
And I'll tell you what, I do this in competitions too, and I still remember one point, because you were refereeing, and you said, Gerhard, if you take too much longer, I'm going to give you a yellow card. I would, the bout was pretty close, and a fencer that comes to coach with us every once in a while, John Charles, he fenced for Penn State. But we talked about it one time, and I would use a tactic that he mentioned to me is between touches, if I needed extra time, just walk back to the end of my strip, tie my shoelaces if I need to, retie them if I needed to, up to the point where the referee's telling you need to get back to your on-guard line. And then I remember I did that one time, and you told me, Gerhard, I see what you're doing, but you do it again, I'm going to give you a yellow card for delay of bout.
Exactly.
But I was trying to take as much time, but also, I don't know if it's a good tactic or not. And I remember it was a close bout, but would you say it would be also a way to try to throw my opponent off their rhythm?
Okay, if the referee's job is to make sure that the bout is done as fairly as possible,
right,
and as evenly as possible. So referees have a rhythm, and
right,
they try to maintain and focus on giving that to both fencers so that they both have an equal advantage. When one fencer tries to throw that rhythm off,
right,
or try to make a change that is detrimental to their opponent, the official's job is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, very good, very good. So that covers a little bit about negative thinking, and we'll review that right at the end, so our fencers remember what it is. The next one you talked about were important principles for a mentally healthy athlete, and this is something that I kind of want to talk about a little bit later. Right. Is this also something that you looked for when you were recruiting for fencers?
Always, because one of the things that you try to do when you're recruiting someone, when you're observing them, you're not only observing them in a competition context, you're also observing them in their dealings, sometimes with their family or with their friends.
Right. If
they've made a campus visit, you're seeing how they deal with new environments and new situations. But basically, you're trying to find out the same things that really are important for general behaviors. Do they show self-respect? Do they show respect for others?
Right.
Do they respect their family, their teammates? Is their behavior disruptive? What type of things are they good at? And definitely, if they're detrimental to themselves or to other people, you want to adapt.
Very good. So you mentioned some of these already: self-respect, self-discipline, respect to others, self-management, physical and psychological self-control, cope and move on, and choose courage. Are these in any particular order?
No.
Okay. So nothing is at the top.
Nothing's more important than the other.
Gotcha.
Right.
So the first one you mentioned is self-respect. What could you say about self-respect? And I know you talked about it very briefly. Say again?
Most people either have it or they don't. The main issue is to what they expect or what they see in others. And it's a measurement usually based on whether they're successful or whether they fail.
Right.
Self-respect itself doesn't have anything to do with whether you succeed or fail.
Mm-hmm.
It really has to do with how well prepared you are, how much you try, how much effort you put into something, so that you can know you, at least in your own abilities, you did your best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On Fort Bragg, I used to be part of a juvenile rehabilitation group. We would see students or kids that did something wrong on the installation. But one of the things we'd always mention to them is can I look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day and be happy with what I did? Did I give it all on the fencing strip? Am I okay with the decisions I made? Whether I won the bout or lost the bout, that was a decision I made, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
Self-discipline. What about self-discipline?
That's mostly if you want to do something and you set a goal for it and you have it in front of you, if you don't do the work to attain that goal, then you don't have self-discipline. So the idea of self-discipline is to build on everything to build up to what you want to accomplish. what you do today prepares you for what you want to do tomorrow.
I see. Did you ever hear the speech by Admiral McRaven about it's called "Make Your Bed"?
I don't think so.
If you get a chance to, it's a great it's a commencement speech he does for a college, I think University of Texas, but it's by Admiral McRaven, and one of the main topics was make your bed, and it's that self-discipline of waking up in the morning and always making your bed. That way you have something you could say you accomplished first thing in the morning, and it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. The next one was respect others.
That's true regardless of their abilities. And that can go two ways, or under respect them. You don't know when you go into something what that person's capabilities are, what that person's is like, that type thing.
Right.
But the most important thing is they shouldn't be able to take anything away from you.
Right.
Okay. Based on how you work with them.
Is this tough for team members that are trying to vie for a spot on the team, like having the top three or four spots?
Yes, very much so. Basically, when you're part of a team, the idea is to work together. It's not to be better than your teammates,
right.
But it's for all of you to be successful and to move forward. And too many people compare themselves or only compete against one or two other people for something that they want.
I see. Self-management, and this comes up a lot with also what I see. Jennifer does her yoga training and her meditation. Self-management. Why is that important?
I think one of the main things is a lot of people, if there's fear of failure and fear of success, and a lot of people have a mixture of that. So in the process of trying to sort that out, they're very dedicated to their teammates. They give everything to someone else in terms of helping them train, but they don't follow through on working toward their own goals.
I see.
So self-management, the idea is you've got to do some of both, but you really can't give much to someone else until you're really focused on what you can accomplish. So you have to do both.
And I'll be honest with you, I've some of the lessons I've learned about self-management I got from you. I would remember, there were times that on the team you said, "Hey, I need to take care of this," and I may not be able to stay late at nights for this particular reason. And I've tried to do that with my own club and my own family. That yes, I've got the club, but I've also got to take care of myself and my family. Those truly come first. The fencing room will be there when I need it to be, but I've got to be able to take care of myself, manage my own time, because if left to my own devices, I'd probably spend a lot of time at the fencing room too. Physical and psychological self-control. Explain those.
Okay. Well, one of them obviously is your body. In other words, if you don't control what you're doing and about, if you're overexcited, underexcited, if you exaggerate your actions, if you're too physical or not physical at all, then you're not managing the situation well.
Right.
Psychologically, it's the same thing. You can be too high, too low, too flat. Much more complicated. So the physical side of it is easier to control. So if you can start out by controlling your footwork, controlling your distance, having the blade work that you want, get that under control, then it's much easier to control the psychological side.
These are the things that you personally can control. And not, I would say, or maybe explaining it this way, not allowing my opponent to control that for me.
Everything we just talked about earlier, negative self-thinking, also is part of this one.
The next one is cope and move on.
This is probably the most important thing, the hardest thing for many collegiate fencers. I get kids at all levels, and sometimes the very best athletes, the very best people in terms of taking lessons, have their ability in competition or ahead of everyone else. They can't control the environment.
Right.
If the opponent makes the referee makes a bad call, if their weapon goes bad, if something distracted them, then it's something that they can blame instead of accepting responsibility for their own actions and focusing on what they're supposed to do.
Right. And I think that's important, and I think everyone will say that is you've got to own your own mistake.
Exactly.
And we've got a sign in the fencing room. It says, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. This also is very similar to some things we talked about.
That's a good one. I like that.
The last one you said was choose courage.
Because too many people choose anxiety or fearfulness or whatever else instead of choosing to be courageous when they start the bout.
Right.
And it's not just at the beginning, but it should start at the beginning of the bout. But you also need it as the bout progresses. If you fall behind, you still need to have the courage to put your best energy forward to make changes and to win at the end.
Right.
You need courage.
And you know, I'm going to assume this. You know, if you have that one success, that just kind of builds up. If you're behind, you get that one more touch. Okay, great. Let's work to the next touch. That all just starts to build upon itself. So just a quick review, and then I want to talk a little bit about collegiate thinking. So turning around negative thinking. Yes, there are disadvantages to negative thinking. Some things we talked about was, makes you weak and encourages wrong behavior. It disturbs your concentration on the task. It results in anxiety and worry. And what were the action steps for getting out of negative thinking?
Shall we say a sequence of things that can occur to help turn things around. So one of the things we didn't talk about is called a negative spiral. We'll get to that in maybe another talk. But it follows on the same process of what we did here. So if you inside your body say, stop, okay, I'm not going to do that behavior again. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to find a way to breathe better, to, shall we say, recycle control. Whether you use a cue word like we talked about then, or whatever else, the idea is to find a series of things that recenter you, that put you back in control.
Right. And I think this is also important for not just as the athlete or the fencer on strip, but for the teammates, maybe parents, to be able to recognize this and not contribute to the negative thinking. They could do that kind of off the strip or during 1 minute breaks. And I'll tell you, I'll give you another example. At Capital Clash, I did not have a great pull. I think I went 50% in my pulls. I was still upbeat. I thought I was still fencing well, and I knew things I had to correct. Got past my first elimination, started feeling a little bit better, and going to second elimination, I'm looking at the person I had, and it was like 6th seed, and I was 13th. I'm like, okay, this might be the end of my day. And when I went to the bout committee table, and I said, hey, I guess they knew me. I don't remember them at all, but they said, you're a lot better fencer. You can do this. I've seen you fence. You can beat that guy. And I was walking away from that thinking, yeah, I can beat that guy. And I did. I got past my second elimination and upset the 6th seed. And so I told the guy later, hey, thanks for the great words, because that kind of picked me up. That got me out of my doom and gloom of negative things. Like, yeah, that's a 6th seed. I was a 13th. He's got me. But I felt a lot better when he told me that. And so that kind of helped me get through that bout. I kept thinking to myself, I am better. I can do this. I can stay ahead. So that was negative thinking. And then just to rehash principles of a mentally healthy athlete, having self-respect, having self-discipline, respect for others as well, not just yourself, but definitely not just for your teammates, but for your opponents. Self-management, physical and psychological self-control, cope and move on. We said that was really important because we all make mistakes, right?
Of all the ones that I deal with, that's the one that is most difficult for some college fans.
Right. And choose courage. And that just kind of goes back to turning around negative thinking.
Right.
So the second part, just for a few minutes, I want to talk about collegiate fencing. I know you're already retired from your time on the team, but and we talked a little bit about this for some of our students that came with us to UNC, but for those that are maybe heading to their junior year, senior year, just some questions. What's life like
for a collegiate fencer. When I was on the team, it was Monday through Thursday. Was that correct? Monday through Thursday, from 3 to 6.
It depends totally on the team and the year.
Right.
As an example, most of the time when you were on the team, and I would say probably 50 of the 52 years that I coach, practice was 3 to 6 or 3:30 to 6.
Right.
Depending on when the classes were. The university changed the class schedule, so 3 o'clock was not a possible start for us, and you have everyone there.
I see.
Also, a couple of years, we also practices were morning. So the only thing.
Do you find for athletes now? Back then, we were as a team. I think we were kind of resistant to being with the trainers. We didn't mind doing the stuff that you did, but the training room and the trainers, we were resistant to that, at least at the time. Do you find a lot of these fencers and athletes are at their peak condition, or are some of them, they're good fencers, they're recreational fencers, but they're not at their peak condition? What's your assessment of that?
Over the years, that has obviously changed.
Right.
Team was all walk-ons. There were more different types of athletes involved. In the last 10 to 20 years that I coached, the majority of them were both elite fencers and elite athletes.
Right.
So the training process
was already ingrained in them.
It was.
Got it.
And it was an integral part of what we did.
Right.
Also, the last 3 or 4 years, we had a very different situation in the weight room.
Right.
So the people that were assigned to us were either interns or time staff, but they had a vested interest in our team. So every time we went, we had the same person. The person ran a workout for the entire team, and the whole team went at the same time. And that was during practice.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest difference.
What would you say is the average, or was the average GPA when you were there for the team?
I would say overall between a 3.4 and a 3.6.
Right.
Which, I mean, the men occasionally were at that 3.6 range. In fact, the last 2 years, they were pretty close to that. The women in general probably had a higher GPA over the total years. But for instance, the last 2 or 3 years, the women were down closer to 3.1 or 3.2.
Right. Roger that.
I think the only team that really consistently was above a 3.0 all the way through.
And besides fencing ability, my son is getting something in the back there. We talked about mentally being a mentally healthy athlete. This kind of lends into that. Besides just pure fencing ability, what were you looking for in individual athletes?
I think the most important thing is, are they good people?
Right.
Are they honest? Do they do the work they're supposed to do? Are they involved in their academics? Because they're not going to survive in a Division I Power 5 school without that.
Right.
They need to be well-rounded.
Very good. Last 2 questions. Specifically for this time right now, for a lot of our beginner fencers, a lot of my fencers have started fencing within the year. What would you say is something that they should be focusing on when we can't get to the fencing room?
Footwork.
Footwork, right.
Footwork is always the key, and not just doing footwork, but doing footwork correctly.
Absolutely.
So whatever they are practicing, they practice to the best of their ability. Just like we talked about before, perfect practice makes perfect permanent. If you're practicing mistakes or just being lazy or slack, you're not practicing. You're hurting yourself.
One of the homeworks that I always give for our beginner fencers, 10 advances, 10 retreats, 10 extensions, 10 lunges. And I always emphasize to them, we're not doing this for speed. Don't knock this out of the park. Take your time. Make sure you're sitting down. For each extension, extend all the way. When you lunge, make sure you go and stay in your lunge. You're not out of balance, and be able to recover correctly. And especially in our videos, we do some videos which is just footwork. And of course, we do continue we do in the class videos, we do the Olympic footwork that I still have from the team. So the last question, if there are a few things that our fencers should focus on to do at home with limited space. Definitely footwork we can do with limited space. Is there anything else that they can do?
Yeah, if they have a wall target, that obviously helps because they can work on the actual distance to the target with their lunge. And it always feels better when you're doing footwork when you can hit something. And there's lots of ways to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that you can find that you can hit that's not going to damage the wall is helpful. Some good things that are on USA Fencing and on Facebook right now, where people have filled up a jacket with pillows and towels.
Right, we've seen some of those examples.
Certainly that helps. Yeah, really anything you can do to take advantage of it. The hard part is when you don't have a lot of space, vertically or width-wise. It's not just the length that you have. What you do overall.
You don't want to put marks all over the house walls. Yeah, I've told our fencers, wherever you can set up space, if you make sure you get your parents' approval, you're not putting holes in the wall. But those are the things I want to talk about. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, your own club, North Carolina Fencing Development Program, is able to go back sometime. That all depends on the university, right?
Yeah, so as long as the university is closed, there's no way we can use the room. But also, the real thing is COVID-19. Whatever the best, safest things are to prevent any further outbreak, especially with our athletes, we don't.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I think we've discovered some other topics that we could talk about a little bit later on. We could discuss offline, but I hope the family and Miss Miller is all safe and healthy, and hopefully the other clubs that you're working with is also safe and healthy. One last thing before we leave, I want to plug the hopefully the summer camp that you do every year. Again, cross fingers. Hopefully, we're on that downward slope. We're close to the end of that curve. When is camp?
Okay, it's the 15th to the 19th of June. But that assumes that public schools will finish. If the schools have to change their calendars, and right now we don't really know what that's going to be.
Right. And where can our fencers find more information about that camp?
Well, right now it's still on ncfdp.org. We will post any changes that occur. There's no reason for anyone to necessarily feel like they have to get space in the camp by applying now or paying a deposit now. We'll wait until we see what's going to happen. But anyone that wants to come is welcome.
Very good. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, again, stay safe and stay healthy. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you again.
Thank you. Same to you, family. All right. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.